What are your perceptions of reality? And what would it take to challenge those perceptions? There are many people that have lived fairly normal lives when suddenly, out of the blue, something happens that challenges everything they believed. Whether it be encountering a UFO, aliens, or maybe seeing a ghost. Some people have experienced a glitch in time, where they are transported back in time, which may only last seconds or even minutes. But for those people, their perception of reality is forever changed, as they have experienced a time slip. The following are 5 time slip stories that may challenge your beliefs. Story number 5. One Saturday afternoon in July of 1996, Frank and his wife Carol were visiting Bold Street in Liverpool, UK to do some shopping. The pair decided to split up and Frank wanted to go to Dylan's bookshop. As he walked up the incline near the Lyceum Post Office building that led into Bold Street, Frank suddenly noticed he had entered a strange oasis of quietness. Suddenly, a small box van that looked like something out of the 1950s sped across his path, honking its horn as it narrowly missed him. Frank noticed the name on the van's side, Kaplan's. When he looked down, Frank saw that he was unexpectedly standing in the road. Frank crossed the road and saw that Dylan's bookshop now had crypts over its entrance. More confused, when he looked in the shop window, there were no books, but women's handbags and shoes. Looking around, Frank realised people were dressed in clothes that appeared to be from the 1940s. Suddenly, he spotted a young girl in her early 20s, dressed in modern-day clothing, and the handbag she was carrying had a popular brand name on it, which reassured him that maybe he was still in 1996. It was a paradox, but he was relieved, and he followed the girl into Cribs. As the pair went inside, Frank watched in amazement as the interior of the building completely changed in a flash to that of Dylan's bookshop of 1996. The girl turned to leave and Frank lightly grasped the girl's arm to attract attention and said, "Did you see that?" She replied, "Yeah, I thought it was a clothes shop. I was going to look around, but now it's a bookshop." Story number 4. A woman and a 5-year-old daughter were driving at night in Dundee, Michigan, and there were no people around anywhere, when all of a sudden, all of her surroundings changed, and it was light, and people were now dressed in clothing from the 1800s. She slammed on the brakes as a lady pushing an old baby carriage was crossing the road right in front of her. She thought she was going crazy. She said that this only happened for a few seconds. Well, she was later asked by a friend, what was the reaction of the people from the 1800s? Did anyone look at you or react? She said that I was looking around and it happened so fast. I remember looking at the people on the street, but I don't remember making eye contact with any of them. I do remember the woman pushing the baby carriage and she just stopped and I'm slamming the brakes so I didn't hit them. She looked frozen in shock, the exact same way I looked and felt. And as I slammed on my brakes, I heard the tyres screech and my eyes never left her. After I jerked forward and stopped, everything went back and it was night again. A few years later, when her daughter was 13, she brought up the incident with her daughter, who said, "I heard you talking and yelling, but I couldn't see you." She said, "Mum, you disappeared for a second." Yet at the time of the incident, I remembered looking at my hands, then at myself in the mirror, and then at my daughter, who was asleep. I was in complete shock. My daughter said that she was awake and saw me disappear, but could hear me. Apparently the slamming and screeching of the brakes was the ending for whatever this event was. Story number 3. A woman believes she experienced a time slip in 1962 when she was 12 years old. She said, "My mother sent me out into our green and grassy backyard in Maryland to pick up the sticks and twigs that had fallen from our very large poplar tree. I had picked up an armload of sticks and bent down to pick up another one, but when I stood back, I was in another place. It looked rather barren and dry, and I could see hills in the distance. I had a sense that my people were there, and it was my job to collect firewood, which is why I was out alone. The wood also seemed more like driftwood and very dry. I never looked behind me, so I don't know if I could have been near water or any wooded area. I could see my hair blowing in the breeze, and it was very long and wild. I looked down and I was wearing fur that went over one shoulder and went down to my thighs. I was barefoot. I knew I was the same person, but I was somehow in a different place and time. It only lasted a few seconds, and then I was back in my backyard in Maryland. I've thought about this for the last 50 years, and I believe that I was doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same time that I was doing in a parallel universal dimension, and that somehow triggered the switch. I often wondered what the me from the other place thought when they appeared in my backyard in 1962. Did they have any understanding of what happened given the limited experience in their life at that time? I didn't really have any firm explanation of the event until a couple of years ago when I read about time slips, and I now believe that's what happened to me. Story number 2. When my mum was a little girl, at around 3 or 4 in about 1953, she was put to bed. My mum said she wasn't sleepy, so she climbed out of bed and went to go downstairs. As she rounded the corner, she was surprised to see a door in the wall opposite the staircase that hadn't been there previously. A woman dressed in a MAID outfit and a white cap emerged from this door in somewhat of a hurry. "Well then," she said in a thick local accent, "who are you?" Confused, my mum just answered, "I want to go downstairs." The woman shrugged and, looking somewhat puzzled, took her hand. They both strode down the hallway together, and she started to help my mum walk down the steep staircase. My mother said the woman was quite pretty and had a nice smile. Looking down the stairs, my mum was confused to notice that the items in the cabinet had changed. Her grandma kept sweets inside a jar in a cabinet, and as a small child she knew very well where they were kept. And she remembers vividly that the cabinet now contained porcelain figures of women and birds. They reached the bottom, and my mum let go of her hand. Turning around, she realised the helpful lady had gone. Happy to have traversed the stairs, my mum emerged triumphantly into the living room. "How on earth did you get down the stairs?" her mother exclaimed. "The lady helped me," she said. Everyone just looked confused. My mother said that the 3-story house had included her dad's barbershop and was on a corner, and there would have been a room behind the wall where the door appeared, and it's very possible the entire structure could have been a single house before the shops were built. All of her life, my mother thought that she'd seen a ghost as a child, but now believes she probably experienced a time slip. Story number 1. This very short story tells of a woman's mother who told her of a strange and eerie experience she had whilst travelling on the top deck of a double-decker bus in London in the 1950s. As she was sitting on a bus, she suddenly became aware of being out in the open and was suddenly surprised when she looked around to see that she was on the top deck of an 1800s horse-drawn double-decker omnibus. She said she froze in shock. The streets and everything around her had changed to what looked like early Victorian times, and everyone was dressed in long dresses and frock coats. She panicked and tried to speak to the other women sitting next to her, but she said they didn't answer, and she wasn't even sure if they could see her. It only lasted a few seconds, but then she was back on the normal bus.